Hello, fraction toolkits are one of the best ways I've ever found to explore fractions. So I'm going to go through how to make a fraction kit. I'm going to share with you also some directions on it, but they're not the best directions I've ever seen, but I don't have an electronic copy of my good directions. So the first thing you're going to do is need to make some fraction strips. Now, if I was making these, when I've done it at school, is I pre-make the strips and I make different colors for each fraction size. However, what I suggest you do is if you have construction paper, 12 by 11 and a half is just, or 18 by 12 is just make 2¼ inch wide ones. And that'll give you just the number that you need. How I did mine is I'm going to scoot you super close to show you, and I'll even So the way I did mine is I took a piece of paper, and because I knew that I could make 8 of them at 2¼ inches, I just went and I measured on one side 2¼ inches and marked it. On the other side, I measured 2¼ inches and marked it. I drew across my paper from mark to mark, and that gave me a 2¼ inch wide fraction strip. I did that all the way down my paper, and I cut 8 strips. Okay, once you have 8 strips, fraction strips, you can start making the different pieces. All right, one strip I'm going to put to the side for one hole. One hole. That's going to represent one hole. One strip is always going to be equivalent to one hole. Now, the first one I'm going to make are halves. Halves are just going to fold it in half and be as precise as possible. Give it a really good crease and then cut on the fold. So you just fold it in half one time and then cut. Make sure you're cutting right in the middle of your crease, and you get 2 halves. So whenever you're working with fractions and you want to make a fraction strip, to draw one, you just partition it into 2 equal pieces. By one line, one cut makes 2 separate pieces. Now, every fraction has 2 parts. It has a numerator, which is the top number, and a denominator, which is the bottom number. And in my class, I wouldn't let students say top number and bottom number anymore. I would say they have to say numerator and denominator. 5th graders should know those terms. Now, when they've made these pieces, they should label each one 1/2. All right. The numerator, my 1, is how many pieces I'm talking about. This is 1 piece. 1 equal piece. The denominator is the size that we're talking about. We're talking the size that it takes 2 to make a whole. So numerator is how many we have. Denominator is how many it takes to make a whole, the size of the piece. So those would be your halves, and you can label those 1/2 each. Next would be quarters. To make quarters, fold it in half. And remember, be precise. Be as perfect as you can fold them in half. Increase it really good. And then fold it in half again. And when I open it up, it should be partitioned into 4 equal pieces. So I can even cut it that way. I can cut it into halves. And then cut each half in half. Right on my fold. Make sure I'm doing it perfectly on my fold. I want these as precise as possible. And when drawing quarters, my hole, remember, is always going to be the same. And what did I do? I partitioned it in half, and then each of those in half. Now each piece is 1 piece. 1 is my numeric, so I'm talking about 1. And it takes, of the size, there takes 4 of them to make a whole. So 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. And I don't have a marker here, but I would mark each of mine 1/4, each of those pieces. All my halves I marked 1/2. Next, we're going to make 8ths. And now students would start bringing up that they notice equivalent fractions. Hey, 2/4 are equivalent to 1/2. Well, 8ths, I'm going to fold in half. And then I'm going to fold in half again, which took me to quarters. Now what I found works better for students, rather than folding these in half again, is to take each one, open it up kind of like this, and take each separate one and fold it in half. So I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to take and fold one up to the crease. Make sure it stays on there. So I have really precise pieces. Take the other one, fold it in half. And then I open it up and count. I should have 8 equal pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If it didn't turn out real well, make a new strip. Make these as precise as possible. So I'm going to cut each of those. And label each of these 1/8. So as I draw this, I partitioned them in half, then in 4ths, and then when I partitioned each of those in half, I got 2, 4, 6, 8 equal pieces. And my pieces are better than what I drew, but when we draw them, they're good enough. One thing we recognize is 1 whole is 1 piece, that it takes 1 piece to make a whole. 1 whole here are 1 2 pieces. 2 pieces, that it takes 2 to make a whole. So 1 whole has the same numerator and denominator. If I take my 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 fourths that make my whole. And then I would ask students, how many eighths make a whole? And they would say 8 eighths make a whole. Now, the next one is usually pretty difficult, 16ths. What I suggest doing, fold it in half, and cut it. Now, with the half, we're going to make half of our 16ths. Most students can tell me now, what is half of 16? And they would say, well, that would be 8 of the 16ths would be half. So what do I have to do? I'm making 8 of them. So now it's 1 piece, fold it in half, and that makes 2 pieces, or fourths. Fold it in half again, and that makes 4 pieces on here, or eighths. Now I do that little trick again where I open it up like a birdie, and I'm going to fold in half, and it's really hard to hold up and show you, so I'm going to just fold it in half like that. Make sure I got to really work hard to get it right to the middle. Sorry that you can't see that very good. See how I'm folding it right to the middle of it? Right there. So I fold it in half. And see how it's in half? And then now I'm going to fold the other side in half. Bringing it up. And now when I open it up, remember this is only half of my 16ths. So I should have 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And like I said, these should be as precise as possible. But I'm going to tell you is it's pretty hard to get these super precise. But you can get really close. I have plenty of students that get them pretty much right on. I can tell you mine aren't quite super perfect, but they're pretty close. So then I cut each of those apart. And I'm going to label each of those